Order of operations. So we have an order of operations that we've done before. So let's just remind ourselves of how we do it. So remember, our little trick to remember how we handle it is please, excuse, my dear, and Sally. So the P stands for parentheses. The E is for exponents. And then we have multiply, divide. And then lastly, add and subtract. So let's look at example 1 to see how we would apply this. So we have 5/6 times 3/5 minus 1/5 raised to the second power. So how we would first deal with this is we have a parentheses, but it's really an exponent. So let's first look at this exponent. So we have 1/5 raised to the second power. So we could rewrite this right here as 5/6 times 3/5 minus, and then we have 1/5 times 1/5. So let's then go ahead and multiply this out. So we have 5/6 times 3/5 minus 1/25. As we multiply the 1's together, we multiplied the 5's together. So now we dealt with exponents. So our next thing will be is to multiply and divide. So we can see that we need to deal with this next. So we would then multiply the top two numbers together, and then we'd multiply the bottom two numbers together. But before we do that, we can actually reduce a little bit. So this 5 and this 5, they can cross out as they're a common factor, and they can each become 1. Now this 3 and the 6 both share a common factor of 3, so we'll divide those out. So we get 3 divided by 3, which is just 1, and then 6 divided by 3, which is then 2. So now we have all these new numbers to multiply. So then we get 1 times 1, which is 1, and then 2 times 1 is 2, minus 1/25. So now we've dealt with our multiply and divide step, and so the last step will be is to add and subtract. So for us to subtract, we need to have a common denominator, and we have 2 and 25. And so what we can do is actually just multiply each number by the other number. And we would do it on the top and the bottom. So 2, for the 25, we'd multiply it by this 2, top and bottom. And then for the 2, we're going to multiply it by 25, or over 25. So then we'll get a common denominator of 50. So then what we do is we multiply this 25 times 1, and we got 25, which is over 50. And then we're going to go minus 1 times this 2, so we get 2/50. So then we can subtract this. Now we have a common denominator, which is 25 minus 2, so then we get 23/50. And this is its reduced form, so this would be our solution. So let's do one last example. So here we have a problem, and so we need to remember our steps. So we have P, E, M, D, and then we have add and subtract. So the first thing we need to deal with is parentheses. We can see that we have a parentheses, which is also known as our absolute value sign. So we will need to address that first. So for this, let's go ahead and write this out right here. So we have 3/4 plus 1/2 to the second power divided by, so we have 1/2, and so we have this absolute sign. And so we can say we have 1/8 minus 1/4. So what we need to do is get a common denominator. So we have minus 1/4. And so one way to do that would just be to multiply this 1/4 by 2/2. So then we'll get 8 on the bottom, just like this term. So let's go ahead and just do this on the side. So we have 1/8 minus 2/8, which gets us to negative 1/8, and it's an absolute sign, so we get positive 1/8 from the absolute sign. So let's go ahead and just rewrite this completely. So we have 3/4 plus 1/2 raised to the second power divided by 1/2, and now we just have 1/8. So we're just going to write that in parentheses. So now we've dealt with our parentheses. The next thing will be is to deal with our exponents, which we have one right here. So how we handle that would be to multiply 1/2 times 1/2. So let's just do this on the side to save some room. So 1/2 times 1/2 is equal to 1/4. So this is when it's 1/2 raised to the second power. So therefore, now we can rewrite this as 3/4 plus 1/4 divided by 1/2 times 1/8. So now we've dealt with the exponents. So now we need to multiply and divide. And we can see that we have a multiplication problem here and a division problem here. So let's go ahead and first multiply. So we have 3/4 plus 1/4 divided by, and then let's go ahead and multiply this top number, and then we're going to multiply this bottom number. So we get 1 times 1, which is 1, 2 times 8 is 16. So this can be rewritten as, then we'll do 3/4 plus, and then this can become a multiplication. So we remember that we can go 1/4, and then we can multiply it by taking the reciprocal of the second term. So it's just 16/1. So let's go ahead and now rewrite this as we can multiply this out now. So we get 3/4 plus, then we're going to multiply it by 1 times 16, and then we're going to multiply this 4 times 1. So we're going to get 1 times 16, which is 16, and 4 times 1 is 4. And now our final step will be is to add these two terms together. So we have a common denominator, so we can go 3 plus 16, which is equal to 19, and we're going to put it over 4 as we keep our common denominator. And that would be our final solution.